everyone. Appreciate you attending today's webinar on the American Rescue Plan Act and its implementation. As you may know, I'm Rick Shuttler, the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Municipal League. I want to introduce some folks. The first thing I want to do is introduce the President of the Pennsylvania Municipal League, Councilman Derek Green from the city of Philadelphia. Mr. President, please.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you all for being here on a somewhat cloudy day here in Philadelphia, but it's definitely brighter skies across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania now that we have the passage of the American Rescue Plan. This plan is going to be such a significant benefit not only for Philadelphia, but cities around the Commonwealth. I know last year through conversations we had with the Pennsylvania Economy League, there were a number of cities that stated in a survey that the Economy League did that if they didn't have any type of additional federal assistance, really were considering going to Act 47. And so that's something that was a real challenge and a concern for us at the league. And so the American Rescue Plan will really provide some real support and assistance for cities throughout the Commonwealth, something that was desperately needed. And I know for many of us, as we're getting ready for a new fiscal year starting July 1, having these dollars will help us come back from the challenges that we had from the pandemic, not only last year, but this year, and help us get back to a better footing. So I want to thank Mike Gleason from National League of Cities for being here, providing his information. I know I've been pouring through the American Rescue Plan Act, and it's a quite voluminous document. And each time I do some information or do some research, I learn about another nugget of information that will be beneficial not only for the city of Philadelphia, but cities throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your participation and support for the Pennsylvania Municipal League. I also want to thank the National League of Cities for supporting our efforts to help cities be stronger together and bounce back from the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you, Councilman. Much appreciated. Folks, I'm going to put my email and Amanda's email in the chat so that we will certainly attempt to answer questions at the end of Michael's presentation. But if we don't get to them, then you can email them to us, and we'll certainly get back to you as soon as possible. But I would ask you also that any questions you have that come up during the course of Michael's presentation, please put them in chat. And then when he's done, we'll monitor those and we'll address those as we go. So we're really thrilled today to have Michael Gleason. As Councilman Green suggested, Mike's part of the federal advocacy team at the National League of Cities, who did a tremendous job in bringing home the American Rescue Plan. We certainly, as the Pennsylvania League, as being a member of the National League, worked very closely with them. And as you know, you've seen what we've advocated over the past year that ultimately came into this success. So we're thrilled, and we're thrilled to have Michael with us. So Michael, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Rick, and thank you, President Green, for having me. On behalf of the National League of Cities, it's a pleasure to be here with the Pennsylvania Municipal League, and I'm happy today to be able to talk about the American Rescue Plan Act with all of you all. Next slide, please. So, excuse me. The way that NLC is talking about this is really as historic intervention or once in a generational opportunity. The money that's coming from the American Rescue Plan Act is $65.1 billion, and it's going to all cities, towns, and villages. And for the first time, this is going to all 19,000 municipal governments that will be entitled to a direct, non-competitive, which is important, federal formula grant from the U.S. Treasury Department. So it's not HUD, it's not anybody else, it's the U.S. Treasury Department. And let's sort of take a step back for a second. If we think back only a year ago when the CARES Act passed, the direct funding went to cities above 500,000, which was only 34 cities in the United States. And then all the other cities, towns, and villages had to fight with their counties or their state for dollars. If the and then when in December, when the rental assistance passed, it went to cities with 200,000 or more. So the idea that all of a sudden, now that we can get money down to every town, city, town, and village, all 19,000 of them, is a tremendous undertaking. and wouldn't be possible without the partnerships of the State Municipal League, as well as in particular Rick and his team at the Pennsylvania Municipal League. So, but what does this mean? So all cities, towns, and villages are entitled to federal grants for new coronavirus local fiscal recovery fund. So everybody's entitled to this, to a grant. Aid is obligated to municipalities in a way that will not be mingled with the state or counties. The counties get their own pot, the states get their own pot, and we, the cities, towns, and villages, get our own pot. So there will be no intermingling, which I think is really important, especially goes back to the CARES Act, the idea of the CARES Act. And aid for municipalities is protected from the state interference with ironclad statute compelling states to comply, which includes penalties for states that do not carry out the responsibilities of small cities or towns. Now, what exactly do I mean by that? And I'll tell you. So there are two ways the money gets passed through, and we'll get into this a little bit later in the presentation. But if a state does not pass through the money to smaller cities and towns, then what happens is the state is owed a debt out of its own pot for the amount that it would be that it would owe to a city or town. So say town X is owed $5 million, the state decide, or the Commonwealth decides to not pass on that money. Well, then the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania will then have to make sure, will then be the U.S. Treasury will say you owe us $5 million. So there's a real incentive to pass this money through and make sure that it gets to every city, town, and village. Next slide, please. So here's the overview of basically how the recovery funds work. States get 195 billion, tribal governments get 20, local governments split $130.2 billion evenly, 65.1 to municipalities, and 65.1 to the 3,000 plus counties. Plus, there's a $10 billion capital funds project. The capital funds project is supposed to work like the coronavirus relief fund, where the money will go to the states, and it's supposed to be for broadband. But as you can see, based on the language here, it really could be for anything, and it could be much more expansive than broadband. So this is, while it's supposed to be for broadband, it can be much more expansive than broadband. But this is the basic breakdown of how the money is going to flow out of this $360 billion fund. Next slide, please. All right, so we've gotten this far, and let's talk about need, how the money is going to break down, and some other pieces to this calculation of how the cities, towns, and villages will get their money. Now, as I said a couple times, there's $65.1 billion that are going to go out to cities, towns, and villages. Now, the National League of Cities has calculated through our research team that there's about $90 billion of revenue shortfall out there. So this is not going to replace all of the money that is needed, but this is going to go a long way towards making sure that cities, towns, and villages get back on their feet. As the president, as President Green said at the top, there were some cities that were looking at taking some very dire steps if they didn't get the money they needed, and this will go a long way to making sure that those fiscal issues are mitigated and making sure that they are in a better fiscal position going into their next budget cycle. So there are two segments of how this money breaks down. 70% of the money, or $45.5 billion, is obligated to cities with 50,000 or more residents. So that is based on the modified CDBG formula. And CDBG is on population size, poverty rates, and measures of housing instability. It's basically a way of prioritizing targeting to need. There was a number of bills that came out last year, the SMART Act, for example, that had infection rate, but infection rates have been all over the place, and other measures of trying to target stuff. NLC worked with the leadership. We worked with Speaker Pelosi's office, Leader Schumer's office, and the House Appropriation Committee. And this was the best formula that we could find to come up to make sure that cities above 50,000 would get the money they needed. Now, 30% of the funds, or 19.5, is obligated to cities with less than 50,000. And this is on a per capita basis within the state. So within the Commonwealth. So within the Commonwealth, all the non-entitlement cities, the ones that are 50,000 or below, will be put into a pool, and they're per capita based on the total amount of people that are non-per capita cities. You will get that money. So that's how that works. And if there's any more questions on that, I'm happy to answer them at the end. I know that I kind of rushed through that a little. The next thing is the small cities cap. Now, one of the issues that Congress had is when it was putting data runs together to try to figure out how much smaller towns and villages would get, they were coming with outsized numbers that said, you know, $1 million for a town of a couple thousand people. And that just didn't make sense to congressional lawmakers. So what they did is they said 75% of the city's most recent pre-pandemic budget is how much they can get in each year. And that each year is interesting because there's two tranches, and I'll get to that in a second. But if you have your most recent pre-pandemic budget, so prior to the health emergency, which was declared on March 1st, 2020, the amount that for non-entitlement cities that they can draw down is 75% of the total allocation that would otherwise be allocated to them. Now, it's a blunt instrument, but Congress really had no other way of trying to understand how this provision would work. So the next thing is funding certainty. This is really great. We have 2 years on coming to cities. The first year comes for comes in the first tranche, comes 60 days after the enactment for entitlement cities. And then it also goes to the states in 60 days. And after the states get it, it goes 30 days after that to non-entitlement cities. So it's 60 days, up to 60 days for entitlement cities, about 90 days for non-entitlement cities with populations of less than 50,000. And then after that, the second half of that is the money, you'll receive that money following the receipt of your first payment. Now, you do not have to spend down your first tranche of money in order to receive your second tranche of money. That's a question I've received a number of times, and I thought I'd just throw that out there preemptively, because I know it's probably on a lot of people's minds. The spending deadline is December 31st, 2024, and unexpended funds will be returned to the Treasury. We're still trying to figure out if that's obligated or actually has to be expended, and we'll get back to you with those answers, as Treasury tries to work out some of those details. The U.S. Department of Treasury works out those details. Next slide, please. So I can't overstate the need for people on this call to be patient. The U.S. Department of Treasury is working as expeditiously as it can to try to get through and stand up this program. They have 60 days to get the money out the door and write the regulations, which will probably coincide with the first round of funding, which is 60 days. But this is a brand new program. Getting money to 60 or 19,000 cities, towns, and villages has just never been done. And so they need all the time that they can get. So we have a page, the Stabilizing Local Government Operations on NLC website. You can put in Stabilizing Local Government Operations, and it will give you a lot of information about the work that we've been doing at this at NLC. Probably the easiest way to find it is on Google. The other thing is frequently asked questions that we've got. And this is so many times we've gotten questions around the allocations. Now, the House Committee on Government or Reform and Oversight produced a number of data runs relating to the how much each city, town, and village will get. Some of those are accurate. Some of those are, have missing towns and villages. And so we are working with the Treasury Department. We sent up so far 2 spreadsheets with cities, towns, and villages that are missing and need to be included. And as we get closer, the gospel will not be those spreadsheets. It will be what Treasury comes out with as they get that final allocation spreadsheet ready. And they're the ones who are ultimately the arbiters who will decide. Next slide, please. So I think this is the slide that everybody is really interested in. So we'll take some time to walk through each one of these because these are the eligible expenditures. So in the first one, there are sort of two things to think about here. To respond to the public health emergency. So if you're responding to the public health emergency, that's an allowable use of funds. Or to respond to the negative impacts, which would include providing assistance to households, small businesses, and nonprofits, or aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, or trade, or hospitality, excuse me. So it's no more restrictive than the coronavirus CARES Act, the CARES Act Coronavirus Relief Fund, excuse me. And if you're doing, if you've already done, assistance to households, rent assistance or grants to small businesses or to nonprofits, for example. And I know Pennsylvania has some travel and tourism communities. We personally like to go to Seven Springs, Pennsylvania. So we would, we understand that there's probably been a downturn in those areas. So, you can use the money to supplement the need there as well. So the next one is to allow municipalities to provide up to $13 per hour above regular wages for eligible workers who perform essential work. Now, who is an eligible worker? Not defined. What is essential work? Not defined. That is all going to be sorted out by Treasury. And this was actually thrown in there in the last minute by the Senate in the last version of the bill before it was finalized and sent back to the House for final passage. So there's still a lot of questions around this one. The third, and I think the one that everybody's most interested in, is the reduction in revenue is in reduction of revenue. So if you have reduction in revenue against your revenues collected in your most recent full fiscal year, then that is, you can backfill your revenue. So it's also prior to the emergency, which is sort of the key here. So it's probably March 1st, 2020 is the demarcation line, but we're going to be talking to Treasury today to get some answers on that. So if probably your FY19 budget will be the budget against which you measure against. And so that's going to be the one, if you have reductions in revenues for 20 and 21, you'll be able to take it against the 19 budget. And finally, the last one, which is also thrown in there at the last second, to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband. We've gotten a lot of questions on wastewater, for example, on stormwater. I don't have an answer on that. That is something Treasury is going to have to provide guidance on. And I also don't know what the word necessary means. But I do know if you look at all the other three, it talks about COVID-19 or the pandemic. This does not have any mention of the pandemic. So if you need to make whatever is deemed necessary investments, and we'll have to see how necessary is defined, but hopefully liberally and broadly, then we'll see that that investments will be able to be taken. You can use it for water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. Next slide, please. So let's talk about a few permissions, restrictions, and requirements, because these are all really important. So a recipient government can transfer the funds to a private nonprofit organization, a public benefit corporation involved in the transport of passengers and cargo, or a special purpose unit of local government. For example, if you have a fire district or something like that, you can transfer those to that. There is no restrictions for local governments on prohibiting tax cuts. And you can also do local stimulus payments. There's nothing that prohibits that as well. I know a lot of people have heard about the tax cuts rule, for example, and that is in section 602 of the bill, and 9901-602, which is the state. And it specifically, I went back and looked this morning, and refers to states and territories. It says nothing at all about local governments, and it's not in our section. Restrictions. So we already talked about the 75% cap. Monies may not be used for pension funds, so that's something to keep in mind. You cannot put any of this money and deposit from this money. You cannot deposit any of this money into a pension fund. And as we said, state governments are prohibited from spending on tax cuts. Requirements. Now, this is one that I cannot stress enough for everybody on the line. All grantees shall make periodic reports available to the U.S. Treasury Department about the accounting of the use of funds. So we have made a plea to the U.S. Treasury Department that that people be able to be hired and staff be allowed to be used, new staff be able to be brought on as an allowable use of the funds, which right now, as you looked at the allowable use, it does not say anything about that. And also for software, because we understand that there are many smaller municipalities that probably have never received a federal grant before, and that this would be a new and difficult and burdensome thing. But there will be reporting requirements that will be required of each and every municipality that gets any money, which is all. So next slide, please. So the ARP is also about stabilizing households and small business, and critically in returning people to work. There's $1,400 checks. Local, there's tax credits, there's benefits for SNAP. If you just sort of slowly go through the next 3 slides, that would be great. There's so much in this bill, as President Green said, that all of these things, Health and Human Services, next slide, please. FEMA, Department of Transportation, the Education Department, and one more slide, please. And household stabilization. And I'll leave it up to the league if they want to send these slides out, or you can reach out to me directly. I can put my email in the chat box. And if you'd like these slides, there's just so much in here that, that all of this is trying to get households and businesses and cities back on stable footing. So there's a lot of good stuff in this bill, and I would encourage you to take a look at this and try to figure out, beyond just what the local stabilization fund is, what else can be used by your municipality to get your city going again. So next slide, please. So what are the next steps? NLC is working with the Treasury Department and the White House on the implementation of this section of the American Rescue Plan, as well as making guidance and suggestions on guidance. We finalized a letter yesterday, and we sent that up there. It was a 21-page letter, 6 pages of sort of outlining the most critical questions, and then another 15 pages of all the questions that we had received so far, which are really interesting, and some of them get really into the weeds. NLC is hosting weekly calls on Friday at 1:30, and we have one today actually. On last week we ran through this deck. We have ones that will be touching on the latest updates from Treasury, who we'll be talking to later this morning, as well as a couple other items in the bill, and we'll be doing this for the next couple of weeks. And if you have any input or questions, or would like to share your stories on the American Rescue Plan, you can use the QR code or the link at the bottom of this slide. Next slide, please. So principles for the local coronavirus local fiscal recovery fund. So the big thing is use dedicated grants and programs first wherever possible. As we slowly scrolled through, there was a lot of money and a lot of programs that have been stood up for in other areas. So it should not be the first priority to use the local fiscal recovery fund as the main source of as the main source of dollars to recover for your city, when other things such as FEMA money or education dollars from the Department of Education may be appropriate. Assess government and assess government operations and community needs. So this is really important. Figure out where you are and build a comprehensive need assessment plan. Bring in stakeholders, talk to people, and try to figure this out, because this is, as we said, this is transformational. It's once in a generation, but at the same time, it's also it has a shelf life of money. It goes till 2024, and who knows if we're going to see these kind of funds again. Prioritize fiscal stability and returning to work. That should be the big thing that these monies should be used for, whether it's the dedicated grants and programs first, or the money that comes from the local fiscal recovery fund. It should be about returning your city back to good fiscal standing. Now, the Congress has just restarted earmarks, and if you have a pet project, save that for the earmark project, or work with your member of Congress, because there's a transportation bill coming right behind this, and that will be the vehicle for a lot of these transportation and infrastructure things outside of water, sewer, and broadband. As I said, maintain records and document successes. It's important for the Treasury to have good records, but it's also important to document your successes, to tell your story, and tell for future leaders what you've been able to do with this money and how you were able to use it successfully. And finally, your congressional delegation is part of your success. Now, I know not everybody in the Commonwealth in your congressional delegation voted for this, but they all love to come to ribbon cuttings and reopenings and show that they were part of it, whether or not they were actually part of it. So one of the things we're stressing is, as we work with the members of Congress on the next bill and the next bill, building goodwill at the local level now will help NLC and the Pennsylvania Municipal League later when we try to get this going, when we try to get other bills across the finish line. Next slide, please. No, we can skip this slide. If you're interested in joining the NLC, here's a slide of the person to reach out to, Timothy Evans at nlc.org. Just give a little plug and shout out to NLC for the work we've done. Next slide, please. That's it. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was great. And we do have a bunch of questions. So let me, Councilman, did you want to say something, Councilman Green?
Yeah, real quick. That was a great presentation, Michael. You also made reference to the fact that the NLC will be doing calls every Friday at 1:30. Will that be an opportunity for people to also ask questions if they don't have a chance to put it in the QR code or ask a question today? And if you can kind of give a perspective on the nature of those calls going forward.
Sure. Well, they're sort of ad hoc right now. Today is, I'll be talking about some of the tax cuts related to that individuals are receiving. I know one of my colleagues will be talking about healthcare, and a colleague will be talking about broadband portions of the bill at 1:30. And then we'll also have an update from the Treasury, or conversation with Treasury. So I can, I'll send Rick the link to join the, and he can send it out to the people on the call right after this, if you want to join our 1:30 call.
Yeah, Rick, I think going forward, that may be a good idea to send that information out to the league, just so if people have additional questions, especially some of the regulations come from Treasury will be updated going forward. So I think it'll be a good opportunity to get additional information and also ask additional questions and follow up on some of the great information that Michael provided, the information we'll need going forward on how we can best utilize the American Rescue Plan.
Thank you both. League staff will also be participating. We did the first one and we will on these, but we'll make sure the link gets out. Thank you. So let me pose some questions. First question, are there enforcement mechanisms beyond the financial penalties to state government? So I assume it meaning if they don't disperse, what are the enforcement mechanisms?
If they don't disperse, then they owe that money back to the debt, back to the government or the U.S. Treasury. But beyond that, there are no enforcement mechanisms.
Okay, so in terms of their disbursement to the non-entitlements, Michael, it's I'm not sure if that was the question, but I'm going to assume that it was that. Are there any other mechanisms regarding that to this?
There are not. I mean,
okay.
we felt pretty confident that, you know, if the Commonwealth was on the hook for $5 million per se, because they didn't dole out the $5 million, that's just not a headline that it's neither a headline they want nor a liability they want to incur.
Very good. I think you spoke to this, but we have a question about when the clarifications will be issued by Treasury. And a number of people are interested about whether stormwater is included in the definition of water and sewer.
Sure. So we pushed on our letter to the Treasury Department to have stormwater included as well as wastewater. We believe that it's a necessary part of water and sewer. So that is in our letter to Treasury, and we hope that the liberal interpretation wins the day. We expect this to take probably at least all of 60 days to get out because this is a new program. It's broad. The White House and the Treasury Department are being inundated with questions, and it just takes time to make sure that they get this right. You know, for example, there were missing cities from places like Michigan that had 200 missing towns. So I know that there are concerns, and you know, they're very conscientious about this. They're working very closely with us, and they want to make sure they get this right.
I won't make any jokes about our good friends from Michigan. Michael, is it anticipated that when we talk about water and sewer, that it would be not only new infrastructure, but would include repair and to existing infrastructure?
I believe so. Yeah, I can't imagine that this is mutually exclusive. The one question that we did put in is, if you've already started a project, can these monies be used to to sort of backfill or supplement a project that's already started? But I can't imagine that this is, that it would only be for new projects and can't be used to repair or replace old stuff.
And thank you. Can funds be used if positions were eliminated, firefighter or any position within the community, eliminated as part of this year's budget? Could the funds be to help replace those positions, bring them back?
I think so, but we're waiting for further Treasury guidance on that one. That's a question we received a number of times. We've posted Treasury.
Very good. Let me keep going. Can a revolving loan fund be set up by a community for small businesses?
Great question. That's a Treasury question as well. Every single presentation I've given, that question has come up, and I don't have a clear answer based on the legislative text.
Gotcha. Can there be, we know the prohibition on reduction of taxes, but if taxes were raised this year before knowing the funds would be available, could there be a tax rebate?
Yeah, and there's nothing in the local government section where you can't have rebates or anything like that. It's free reign for local governments. So
just to clarify that, Michael, the issue on the reduction of taxes is really at the state level, in our case, the Commonwealth government level, in terms of not reducing taxes, right? Okay, that's a key piece. Can a local government assist a school district?
It depends on how the Commonwealth is set up. If they're a special purpose unit of local government, probably. I mean, it says that you can make a transfer to a special purpose unit of local government. So if So in that case, yes. Also, I believe most school districts are set up as nonprofits. So, if it, oh, go ahead, Rick.
No, I'm sorry. In Pennsylvania, a school district would be part of the local governmental structure. They're a taxing entity also. As I read, Michael, and I don't want to, folks, please take this with, as I read what they were referring to as a special unit local government in Pennsylvania, which I think a school district clearly, but also would include authorities, because we have a lot of incorporated, authorities for a variety of purposes.
Absolutely. Yeah. I could think of like, the one that comes to my mind is like in New York where you have like the Bridge and Tunnel Authority or something like that.
We have a lot of, we just utilize those are, water, sewer, parking, all those things that I think would look to me like it would meet that definition. So,
Absolutely.
Okay. School districts are getting their own funding too, though, right? I mean,
they are getting a substantial amount of funds. This is the third round of funding that they'll be getting.
There was a question about whether small municipalities would now be facing A133 audits. You know the answer to that?
I'm not sure what an A133 audit is.
I think we're referring to the fact that they would now be receiving federal funds, and it may do that. We'll answer that one separately in the near future. Keep going. Can the money be used on an emergency operations center readiness, for instance, the purchasing of a generator?
I think under A, it's response to the pandemic, so it could be. It's again, I think there's probably going to be a liberal interpretation on how these funds can be used, but I can't say for certain on some of these ones, especially on very specific questions. And I don't want to mislead somebody and have someone purchase something and have it later be audited incorrectly.
If there are questions about the eligibility of specific projects or uses of funds, what agency is the appropriate one to ask the question to?
The U.S. Department of Treasury.
Treasury will be, okay. I'm anticipating, this is more editorial comment on my part, Michael, but I'm anticipating that that's going to be a whole new ball game. So many folks are dealing with, either at the state or at the federal level. If it's CDBG funds, you're talking to HUD. If environmental, you're talking to, EPA and in our case, DEP. But Treasury's it's a whole new sort of connection to local government, really.
It really is, because, as I said in my opening, only 34 of the cities got direct funding from the CARES Act, and now you're looking at 19,000 with potentially audits of any or all of them. Gotcha.
The city receives CARES Act funding at the county level, and they use the salary extension of the police bureau with the assumption that public safety salaries were presumed to be COVID related. Do we anticipate that same sort of broad flexibility with these funds, with the rescue plan funds?
Yeah, I think under A, the first section, responding to the coronavirus relief, responding to the coronavirus, I would assume we'd have similar flexibility.
Okay. Consulting fees related to, infrastructure investments eligible, design fees?
Well, I think there's two parts to that question. One is, what is infrastructure? And I think if we're talking about like roads or bridges.
Water, sewer, let's stay with water, sewer.
Water, sewer, I don't know. I think it would be a necessary expense. So we'd probably be an eligible expense, but we need to get clarification on that.
Yeah, I would think just my own, to segregate the design fees from a major water sewer project, to me would not make sense. You got to design it. Yeah. In parts of the rescue plan, there's a provision for 2% administrative fees. It doesn't exist in our portion, state and local government portion. Is anticipate that 2% would be allowable?
No, I haven't seen anything about a 2% administrative fee in the local government section.
Okay. Can municipalities set up funds to help folks pay electric bills and to avoid shutoffs, and funds for food bank? Would that be eligible?
So yeah, funds for food banks would be a nonprofit, and homeowners and utility assistance would be allowed, likely be allowed under the the second portion of A of the first eligible use.
There was an answer, someone provided an answer to the previous question about the audit kick-in, who indicated that 750,000 would be the amount spent in a single year that would trigger the single audit. Can upgrades be made to a designated shelter? I'm going to assume shelter to be, homeless, but I don't know that for sure.
I'm not really sure. It
Yeah.
doesn't, I think that's a Treasury guidance question.
Yeah, although I do think that if we're making, if you read what it said about homeless and the eligibility there, you would kind of think that depending on what those repairs were, I guess that would be eligible. But we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. It's a designated emergency shelter. So
yeah.
Do you have a contact yet at Treasury? Is Treasury, are we able to supply people with how they should be contacting Treasury and who the appropriate entity or department is?
We are actually working directly through the White House, but we have a call today with the Treasury Department, and we'll get a contact to you, Rick, this afternoon.
Thank you. So for everyone's edification, we're going to be doing something at the district meetings on April 6th, as well as in May, first week of May at our Capitol conference. So these are the kind of updates hopefully we'll have by then, and we might be able to we'll have more information. So stay tuned. Obviously, this is going to be fluid over the next 60 days. And as we continue to work with Michael and the rest of his team at the National League, we'll have more and more answers for this. Can affordable housing eligible use?
Yes, that's certainly part of A. Would be allowed for that.
Got it. I think I covered them all. Amanda, we will, one more, I'm sorry. Funding to volunteer fire companies. Any restrictions?
If they're potentially a special unit of local government.
Most of them are, most of them are incorporated as nonprofits.
Then if it's a nonprofit, yes.
Okay.
Then you can transfer the money to them.
Amanda will make available the slides. We'll send them out, but I think we'll post them on the website also, so it'll be available, and we'll make sure that everybody has information on the National League and their that may be out there already too. I'm not sure about that, but we'll certainly make that available to everyone. Michael, anything else that you would want to add?
No, I would just say it's really important. I did a call earlier this week, and someone was talking about rebuilding records, after the fact for an audit. Please, please, please think about putting in good procedures ahead of time to make sure that in case, when you do have to make these periodic reports to Treasury, that you are thinking about how the money is going out, and you're making the appropriate requirement or records decisions.
We're going to want to thank you, Michael. We're certainly your statutory, your regulatory requirements in terms of reporting to Treasury, you're going to see more of. But we as a league are going to want to collect the good stories, because it's going to be really important for us to be able to show how this money, benefited Pennsylvania's communities, and it went to really good use. So we're going to be reaching out to all of you over the next 2 years and asking you those questions and making sure that we're doing those. We can put them in our publications and creating a really good record of how this money has advanced Pennsylvania. So,
and Rick, if I could follow up on that point.
Yes, sir, please.
You must have been reading my mind, because that was a great point. And to the extent that as various jurisdictions, municipalities are having these new projects based on the American Rescue Plan, if you put things out through social media, make sure you hashtag PML. So that's another way we can capture this information and data to really demonstrate how the American Rescue Plan helped the municipalities within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Councilman. Michael, thank you. Amanda, anything else we need, any housekeeping we need to do?
I don't think so. Like you said, we'll be sending out an email later on today with the link to the recording of this webinar, as well as the slides from the presentation. And like Rick said, we'll also have those posted on the website.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for participating. Hope you enjoyed it. I understand there's still some unanswered questions. I get it. But we're going to continue to do we thought an initial one made sense, and we'll have more scheduled, and we'll provide more information. So stay tuned. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you,
Take care.
Councilman Green. Thank you, Michael, very much. Take care, everybody.
Thank
Have
you,
a good
Michael.
day.
Take care, everyone.